My name is Ann Hesse, and I'm chair of the Democrats Abroad Global Women's Caucus. I'm joined by Angela Fobbs, DA Global Black Caucus chair. And to help us put that spotlight on some great women candidates, we have Carol Moore, who chairs our Women's Caucus Candidate Information Team. We're honored today to have three special guests from two crucial battleground states with us today. We'll hear from one sitting member of Congress and two candidates eager to flip red seats blue and join her in Washington. Before we get started with our guests, please note that we've gathered together questions that attendees have sent in, and we'll be sharing these on the call today. We also encourage you to add your questions to the Zoom Q&A box right at the bottom of your screen or in our Facebook chat box. And please join our DA Voter Champions Action Call immediately following this event to hear about what we can do right now to mobilize the expat vote. We'll share more information about this at the end of the call and pop the Zoom link into the chat box for you. Now, I'd like to introduce our guests. Our first guest is Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin. Elissa Slotkin has represented Michigan's 8th congressional district since January 2019, winning against a Republican incumbent in a district won by Trump in 2016. From Michigan, she decided to join the CIA after the 9/11 attacks, devoting her career to protecting the US from national security threats. Slotkin served 3 tours in Iraq as CIA militia expert and later was the acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs under President Obama. In September 2019, she was one of 7 freshman Democratic members of Congress, all veterans of the military or intelligence agencies, who signed a letter in the Washington Post calling for the House to launch an impeachment inquiry. So please join me in welcoming Elissa. Elissa, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Ann, and thanks everyone for having me. It is great to be on and great to be streaming, and especially good to be in the virtual room with my Midwestern sisters running for Congress. It is not every day that as a Midwestern Democrat, I am hanging out with other Midwestern Democrats. We are a very mixed part of the country. We are a swingy part of the country and sometimes an overlooked part of the country, and we are a special part of the country. The Midwest has a real tradition of being a swing state and therefore of bipartisanship. We grew up, certainly when I was growing up, my dad was a Republican, my mom was a Democrat. Most of us come from mixed political families, and most of us remember a time when we didn't fight with vitriol about politics, when we could still disagree without being disagreeable. We could still have those philosophical debates between parties and not infuse those debates with hate and anger and mistrust. And I know right now in the Midwest, along with other parts of the country, we're really feeling that tension that's been imported from Washington. And every single day, people tell me, like, I just want to be able to have different opinions, different views, but have our elected leaders represent the kind of leadership that I want my kids to emulate. And just bothers people that they can't turn on their TV and see their leaders as someone who can be a role model for their kids. So I'm especially proud to be here with other great Midwestern candidates. I'm Elissa Slotkin, as you said. I'm a national security person by training, but got into running after the tone and tenor of politics in 2016 just felt completely unbecoming to the country I serve, the country that we all love, and decided to think about running for the first time in my life. And I think one of the other great things about kind of the moment we're in right now is leaders who had never been particularly political, folks who hadn't been like dreaming since they were 10 years old about running for office are now stepping up to run for office and saying, like, if not now, then when? And if not me, then who? And I think that that's a really great thing, not just for this coming election, which of course we're all focused on and obsessed on and talking about, but also about building the bench of the Democratic Party, of building that next generation that is going to work harder and think differently and never forget that they are public servants. That is a very, very important value for the folks that are now kind of running and getting into leadership for the first time. that our district, our residents, they are the only ones who can hire and fire us. And that is something very, very present when you run in a competitive place like the Midwest. You never get to like grow moss on you because you're constantly ensuring that you're out in the community and talking to all different types of people. You can only run here and succeed here by appealing to a broad base of people. And that's what I know all the candidates here are trying to do, and certainly what I did in 2018 and how I'm trying to govern now that I'm a new member of Congress. And I will just say, because I really want time for our candidates, that it is never a better time to be talking to Democrats abroad than right now ahead of this election. Because the issues that frankly have always been front and center for our constituents and for our citizens abroad are now becoming sort of nationally talked about, right? Absentee voting, voting by mail. Y'all have been doing it for a long time. Making sure your votes count, right? Making sure that if you're going to take the time to vote from abroad, that you're going to actually have it count in elections. I think we have more people more educated now about the role of absentee voting and how important it is to get those counts right than ever, and that's going to be a really big deal for this election. You all are also in the same category, frankly, as our uniformed military serving abroad, who have a role to play in our elections, but because of both COVID and the US Postal Service delays, are really at risk of having your vote count. And it's something I've been talking a ton about. We were just in Washington 2 Saturdays ago for an emergency vote on the Postal Service to at least fund it in a way that allows us to execute this election. And frankly, do a lot of other things like get people their prescription drugs and medical devices that they depend on through the mail. But we all know that voting by mail is a safe and reasonable way to participate in our democracy. Some states only vote by mail. It is something that we all know is a responsible way so that you don't have to make a choice between your health and your vote. Now, for you abroad, you didn't have that choice to begin with. It was always making sure that your vote counted, and I know you are all engaged in that. But I think it's also important to note that because of all the absentee voting, the precipitous increases, and how some states like Michigan, and I'm guessing potentially maybe Ohio, you can't start counting those votes until Election Day. So we will probably not know who won our election on election night. And you abroad are used to staying up really late and waiting and going and doing like a crazy overnighter like you're a college kids, right, waiting to see what happens. The schedule will be more on your time because we will not be able to know in certain areas who's won. And that's a very tension-filled moment for our country. And so what I'm really pleading as a leader, as an elected leader, regardless of party, is let's talk about being responsible. There's a constitutional process for certifying our elections. Let's follow it. And let's not create uncertainty in a system that we have fought very, very hard to preserve. So I'm thrilled to be here. Our citizens abroad, I've spent so much of my career abroad, serving in different places. It's my honor to be with you and to be with these two fantastic candidates. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Elissa. What you've said means so much to us, all of the people listening around the world. It really is important to us. We really, really appreciate it. And now I would like to introduce Hillary Scholten. Hillary Scholten was raised in Michigan and began her career in social work, fighting LGBTQ+ housing discrimination. She went to law school and worked in the Department of Justice in the Obama administration on immigration policies, later joining the Michigan Immigrants' Rights Center. She's running to flip Michigan's 3rd congressional district blue, a battleground district where the Libertarian incumbent, Justin Amash, decided in July to withdraw from the race. So welcome, and the mic is yours.
Thank you so much. Democrats abroad, thank you to our wonderful panelists. Really just want to echo Congresswoman Slotkin's statements. It's such a joy to be here with both of you. Congresswoman Slotkin, I know, has served as a real role model and inspiration for a lot of Midwestern women who were just disgusted with the, as she said, the tone and tenor of politics, and thought now is the time. Now is the time for us to bring outside experiences, outside voices to bear on our political process. And her story is so much the story of 2018. Women who have deep experience, all candidates, but largely women who have deep experience in other areas, raising their hand to run. And that's my story too. I was born and raised in West Michigan. I did not grow up in an overly political family. I was raised in a pretty conservative religious community. If anything, my parents were certainly Republican and Republican leaning for my mom. My dad, I think, would still consider himself somewhat of a Republican, though he's out there delivering my yard signs as we speak. So fully on board here. My mom was a Grand Rapids public school teacher. My dad was our local sports reporter. And they really instilled in me a strong sense of service, of giving back to your community. When you saw a need in your community, a broken issue, it wasn't somebody else's problem to fix. It was, if that problem was laid in front of your feet, it was yours to fix. I saw my mom respond to the needs of her students and their families when they struggled. And her commitment to service really inspired me to commit my life to service as well. It's why I became a social worker and eventually a public interest lawyer. I proudly served the Department of Justice. I didn't join for political reasons, but rather to improve our nation's laws, to make them more just, more fair, more humane. The Obama administration certainly didn't get it all right when it came to immigration, but I felt that every day our job was to make our laws more just, more fair, more humane. All that changed when Donald Trump was elected and Jeff Sessions took over. And so I took a stand and I left rather than compromise my oath to uphold the Constitution. And I moved back home to West Michigan, where I've been serving our community as a public interest lawyer ever since. And in that time, I have just seen such incredible need from folks lacking access to affordable healthcare, poisoned drinking water, from lead to toxic PFAS chemicals running rampant throughout our district. And now an economy in shambles in the wake of COVID-19. And just like my parents taught me to do, I looked deep inside myself. And as Congresswoman Slotkin said, asked myself, if not me, then who? So I raised my hand to run. And the support has just been overwhelming. We have taken this campaign from a handful of grassroots supporters gathered in a park just over a year ago to now running a nationally recognized $1 million campaign that's on the brink of making history by electing the first Democrat in almost half a century and the first woman ever to represent this district. It's such an exciting time. We're building something new here in West Michigan, a new political home for people who have felt shut out of the political process, either because they're poor and marginalized and feel that their voices have never been heard, or whether they feel like I hear so often, I didn't leave the Republican Party left me, and I don't know where to go. People who, as I say in my commercials, want a leader who is focused on right versus wrong, not right versus left. And we are so excited about the support that we are building, excited to talk to you here today and make sure that your voices are heard in our electoral process in November. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Oh, that's also so good to hear. I'm so excited for you. Oh, that's just wonderful. And now we'll turn to a different state. I'd like to introduce Kate Schroder. Kate Schroder is a fifth-generation Cincinnatian running to flip Ohio's first congressional district blue. She's a healthcare professional and a legislative expert with more than 15 years of experience, 2 of which were spent in Zambia, working for the Clinton Health Access as a country director. Kate also holds an MBA from the Wharton School and is currently the finance chair of the Cincinnati Board of Public Health, an important position right now, I could imagine. So welcome, Kate, and the mic is yours.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks, Democrats Abroad. I am Kate Schroder. I am so honored and inspired to be here today, especially with Elissa and with Hillary. It is, it's exciting to be part of this movement that, Elissa, you have created and that is helping to pave the path for Hillary and me. So thank you. As Anne mentioned, I grew up here in Cincinnati, born and raised, and I have a 5- and 7-year-old now, raising my kids here as well in public schools. I was raised in a family of 4. I was the second of 4 kids, and similar to what Hillary is saying, like I was raised on the values of social justice and service. You know, 1 of 4 kids, we wanted to compete on everything. My parents would have nothing of it. They cared about kindness and hard work and doing the right thing. And just a quick story from my childhood. I did go to a Catholic school for grade school, and we had mass twice a week, every Thursday and every Sunday. And the boys would always put on the white robes and be altar boys that would go up front and serve and assist the priests during the mass. And one time in 5th grade, when I was 10 years old, the priest came to our class in May and said, can any of the boys help out on Sunday? We had a cancellation for Pentecost mass. And these are 5th grade boys, and nobody raises their hand. And so the priest asked again, you know, can anyone please help out on Sunday? We need someone. And nobody raises their hand, so I do. And it was super awkward because they never had a girl do this before. The priest didn't know what to do. He looked at the teacher looked at the priest. And eventually the priest turns to me and says, well, do you know what to do? And I said, I think so. I've watched it a lot. And he said, okay, we'll come on Sunday. So I went on Sunday, and I put on the white robe and I served the mass, and everything was fine. And from that point forward, there were always altar girls as well as altar boys at Nativity. And I share that story, not because I was trying to do anything dramatic or bring attention to myself. I was trying to be a helper and a doer. And that is the same person that I am today. I spent my career, I spent 3 years in legislative politics. I went to Indiana, and then I worked for Senator Evan Bayh in Washington, D.C., and also in City Hall here in Cincinnati. And then I thought, oh, the pace, I was frustrated with the pace of politics. And I thought I wanted to get my MBA and be able to flip between the public and private sector. So I went to University of Pennsylvania, got my MBA, spent 3 years doing best practice research for hospitals at the advisory board company. And then as life happens, one of the most pivotal moments of my life, I was recruited to move to Lusaka, Zambia, to open the office for the Clinton Health Access Initiative. So I lived there 07 to 09, and I was part of Democrats Abroad when Barack Obama was elected. And I, you know, have such vivid memories early morning, listening around a radio outside of my little flat with a bunch of people listening to his speech, and just all of us with tears down our eyes. And I remember so many conversations I had from my time living in Zambia about what does it mean to you to live in a democracy? To live in a place where your vote is counted and you trust that it's counted and you get the result that same day. I mean, it's just so interesting and scary to me, you know, how far we've fallen since that time and since I had those many late night conversations. I have spent 12 years staying in public health and absolutely loving it. I mean, I think, you know, as the others on this call know, you know, that it's a real calling and service to have an opportunity to work in an environment like that, to see our eyes from the eyes of another country, or our country from the eyes of another country. And I spent the last 5 years leading a global program. My team yells at me all the time when I talk about it, but addressing mortality in pediatric diarrhea. So diarrhea is the #2 killer of kids globally. And almost all of those deaths can be prevented, half with treatment, half with vaccines. And I led a program across India, Nigeria, Kenya, and Uganda that reduced the price of treatment by 40% nationally in those countries, and increased the number of kids getting correct treatment from 1.2 million to 55 million kids. And it is estimated that this work has helped save the lives of 76,000 kids. And we've published on it too, because we accept and believe science and we want to get the word out there. We moved to Cincinnati 7 years ago to raise our kids and family here, and I've been spending the last 4 years on our Board of Health, in particular leading an effort to expand dental services in our public health clinics. And that's what I like to do. I like to solve problems. It's like what gets me up in the morning and what motivates me. I am 43 now. 10 years ago, I did encounter a problem that I could not solve. I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma after noticing bumps on my right clavicle for a few weeks. And I had one of those days that so many people have, like a before after day, where all the things you thought were stressing you out just evaporate. And the only thing that matters is, can it work? Can I access the healthcare, and will it work on my body? And it is an incredibly humbling and vulnerable feeling. And I was so lucky, I had insurance that allowed me to access the treatment. And more than anything, I was lucky that it worked. I hit the 5-year mark. I'm now at the 10-year mark. But I've never forgotten that feeling of vulnerability. And it's a huge part of what motivates me to run. I'm running against someone who has voted over 50 times to take healthcare away from people with no alternative plan. He's voted against coverage for pre-existing conditions. And that is so personal to me. I live with a pre-existing condition. And if he had his way, I would not have insurance. And our country has so many real and pressing problems, as we've been talking about: the pandemic, the economy, racial injustices that have perpetuated for hundreds of years. And I fundamentally believe we are not going to solve these with the status quo. For too long, we've been electing people like my opponent, who's been in for 24 years, and he focuses on dividing us and pulling us apart. And I believe the majority of Americans want people that bring us together and get things done. And I am a low ego mom. I know how to de-escalate. I have a 5- and 7-year-old. I do it every day. I do it 10 times a day in the pandemic. And that's the attitude that I want to bring to Congress. And this district was drawn, for anyone who can see it, I have a very gerrymandered district. It was drawn to be 5 points Republican. And a lot of people passed it up because, it's so frustrating how undemocratic it is. And a lot of people believe that this wasn't winnable, but I will tell you now, we are tied in the polls, which is very motivating. We got moved over the summer from lean Republican to toss up with the main political rating agencies. And we are going to do this. It is, and it's not about me. It is about all of us. I am raising my hand again to serve in this new way and to be part of this movement that we are creating, both in the US and abroad, with all of you, saying that enough is enough, that our country and community deserve better leadership. So I'm honored and excited to be here today and look forward to getting into questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Kate. I'm so moved by what you had to say. My goodness, I'm sure everybody is. And we're so lucky to have you. And you're going to flip it. You're going to flip that thing. I know you will. So now we've had many, many, many questions come in from our members around the world. And Carol will be asking some of these questions that we've received. And Angela will be collecting your questions from the Q&A box to all of you out there listening. So go ahead and put them in the Facebook chat box or our Q&A box here on Zoom, and we'll see if we have time to get them to our candidates. So Carol, are you ready?
Oh, absolutely. And may I say thank you to all three of you. It is fantastic to have you in person talking about what drove you to run and give yourself this fantastic opportunity to be public servants at a time when we desperately need it. My first question is for Elissa. Elissa, in your work at the Pentagon, you led a study into the effects of climate change on our military capabilities around the world. You stated that you saw climate change as a national security issue. Can you explain what you meant by that and what steps Congress can take to address climate change going forward? But I'm going to add on a little question about what's going on in Congress right now with the administration denying Congress access to intelligence reports. Maybe you could say a little bit about what that impact might be on the foreign threat to elections. Thank you.
Just two light issues. Let's start it. Let's keep it light, ladies. Let's keep it light.
Hey, we only get this chance once in a while.
No, of course. No. These are the issues these are important issues. So on climate change, indeed, when I was an acting assistant secretary of defense, my team helped write the first study that the Pentagon ever authored on how climate change would affect the military. And we looked at things like just basic, ideas of naval bases that will be at least partially underwater, firing ranges that will be too hot to use too many days of the year. We looked at the melting of the Arctic and how that will increase competition with Russia. We looked at food insecurity due to climate change that will precipitate more conflicts abroad that may threaten to suck in the military. And then a big one was an increase in the number of and sort of ferocity of superstorms in our country. And of course, it's the National Guard that are often, and sometimes active duty, that are called out to help when we have those kinds of, superstorm Sandy or whatever. So it really is poised to deeply affect the military, the uniformed military, in a number of really important ways. And I have no environmental science background, but it was very clear to me as a national security person that this is a national security threat. I mean, it is in there. And in the Pentagon, we're sort of like planners by training. You're constantly thinking of contingencies. And if you have only a 5 or 10% chance of something coming, you're constantly planning against that. And if it never happens, great, you're prepared. If it happens, you have a plan that you can, on the shelf that you can work from. So if people put aside the politics of climate change, if we even have a 5% chance that these outcomes could happen, the US military, the Pentagon, the government in general should be planning for these contingency scenarios. So that was our report. And what I'm happy to say, that was back in 2014. Now, fast forward, and I sit on the Armed Services Committee. So we, pass the Pentagon budget every year. And I must say, I feel like I've seen a real evolution for folks on connecting these issues. And that includes some of my very brave Republican counterparts. Okay. I just before this signed on to a letter that was to the Senate saying the important environment-related provisions in the NDAA on climate change, transferring our, the military is a huge consumer of energy, and really pushing that the replacement vehicles, the land vehicles of the future should be at least a hybrid, if not fully electric. We should go to alternative fuels. There's all these different things that was in this giant Pentagon budget that we passed. And it was a bipartisan letter from members in the committee saying we want those provisions to stick and to be held into the Senate, conference version. So I do think there's been some evolution, which is good. To be honest, though, we can pass these laws in sort of this piecemeal way, but we have to sort of grapple with the fact that unless and until we do something really like significant related to mitigating climate change, some of those worst case scenarios are going to be upon us sooner than we can affect. So I'm a big believer that hopefully in a different political climate, we need to have what I call, for lack of a better term, the Green Manhattan Project. The greatest minds of a generation in a room figuring out significant ways to reduce emissions and to mitigate the effects of climate change. And there's a ton of legislation already on the shelf, but we have to remember that we have to bring along our Republican colleagues. We have to explain why this makes not only good environmental sense, but actually makes good economic sense, right? Michigan will be happy to take more wind business, right? We'll be happy to take some of the alternative energy business that would come out of it. So you have to have a bigger, bolder vision. But in the meantime, I think we've come a long way on seeing it as a national security issue. And in Michigan, environmental security is actually homeland security. It's what Hillary was talking about. If you can't hand your child a glass of water without knowing that he or she might get a lifelong learning disability or an early childhood cancer, that is a threat to your family. Bigger threat than any terrorist attack. So I see it as homeland security and preservation of our families and our way of life. On election security, we did receive a series of classified briefings and classified reports on foreign attempts to influence our election. And while I have a deep problem with them just deciding, certainly as a CIA officer, just saying we're not going to be providing these briefings, that's a real problem to tell the person who pays your bills that you're just not going to be providing these updates, right? We still control the money. So there's lots of interesting discussions going on. But I will say that we have not passed one law since 2016 that makes us any safer from foreign influence in our electoral system, in our political process. And Michigan, and I'm guessing Ohio too, were major, major targets for these foreign actors with these fake Facebook ads, with these fake groups fomenting anger among us and between us, just so that we'd be distracted and we would not think about the Russians in particular, right, and their influence. So the Russians and others have gotten more sophisticated. They've gotten less ham-handed. They've paired up with more, American blogs and groups and sort of have like done this laundering of information through American sources so that it's not a foreign source that's telling me that I should be scared of Muslim people in Detroit, right? It's an American source. So they've gotten more sophisticated, and we have not passed a law that's made us safer from that. And I have co-sponsored, dozens of pieces at this point. So the most important thing is that it's at this point too late. We need to be vigilant, and we need to question where information is coming from, even if we think it's coming from our friends. And that goes for people on the right and on the left, Democrats and Republicans. There's a lot of trash out there, and it is meant to divide us. And right now, it's not hard. It's not hard to do. There's a tone that's been set in our country that's very dangerous. And that kind of information seems to reinforce people's sort of already existing doubts. So we just have to be hyper vigilant, including on our own Facebook pages, and not think it's just happening to someone else.
Great. Oh, well, thank you for helping us define what the scope of this is, so we can not only, I think you're preaching to the converted, obviously here, but when we talk to our friends and family, that we can give them the message that really trusted sources and big issues are what really count. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, the second question for Hillary. For Americans living abroad, immigration issues are never far from our mind. You worked at the Michigan Immigrant Rights Coalition. And what are the immigration policies you would advocate to correct the harm done by this Trump administration? And proactively, what can be done to repair the broken immigration system that now affects so many undocumented workers living in our country and asylum seekers, as well as immigrants who wish to take advantage of the freedom in America?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. That's such a great question. It was the Muslim travel ban that precipitated my departure from the Department of Justice. It was Trump's second week in office, and I will never forget working late, working over the weekend on two really difficult cases regarding civil detention. And I watched my fellow non-government attorneys flooding the airport, sitting on the floors, filing late night habeas petitions to the courts to try to get individuals who were stuck in secondary at airports across the country, doctors, nurses, surgeons, grandmothers, mothers, fathers, who, because of the last minute whims and late night tweets, policy by late night tweets of our president, saw their lives upended. That has had such a significant ripple effect, not only in terms of policy, but in terms of our national perception around immigrants, refugees, and others who want to come to the United States. So I really view the reversal of our immigration policy as a two-step process. One is the core policy issues themselves, and one is a deep change in the rhetoric around immigration that this president has just done such significant damage to. We need to reclaim our identity as a welcoming country for immigrants. And that does not come at the expense of securing our borders and national security. These things are not mutually exclusive. So many of Trump's policies have demonstrably made us less safe when it comes to immigration. In terms of, correcting what can be done, I think there is a very, in many sectors, and immigration is one of them, there's a very active conversation happening around, do you one by one start scaling back all of the problematic executive orders and policy changes, or are we now in sort of a scorched earth place where a phoenix will sort of rise from the ashes, and we will be able to create something entirely new? Let's not forget our entire immigration system as we know it now is actually relatively new. The Immigration and Nationality Act wasn't passed as a comprehensive document until the 1950s. So it's not exactly like we're scrapping the entire thing. And given increasing modernization and globalization, it is time that we look to have laws around immigration that are in line with our 21st century economy as well.
Right.
I think there are three core things that I look to. We need to increase, not decrease, the legal pathways to immigration, including creating opportunities for workers to come to the United States legally. We need to renew our commitment to refugees and asylum seekers abroad by increasing, again, not decreasing, our legal pathways for individuals to come here. We do need border security. We don't need a border wall. We have so many sophisticated technological advances that will help us secure our border in a way that also protects the environment and keeps our border communities safe as well. And finally, we really need to look at restoring diplomatic relationships with sending countries. We saw that aid, particularly to the Northern Triangle region, had a significant impact on decreasing the number of migrants that came to the United States. So those are, when I look at that, those are sort of the three core elements that I look at. I love talking to Republicans here in West Michigan when they think that maybe sounds like a crazy radical idea. And I invite them to go look at the George W. Bush Policy Institute page on immigration, which has those three core components as the priorities for comprehensive immigration reform. So I think that those are a really key starting points, as well as, as I mentioned, just really beginning to reverse some of that very dangerous rhetoric around foreigners, foreign countries that has damaged our standing abroad.
Well, we can certainly confirm that. And may I say thank you. And the concept of this as a bipartisan framework that you're suggesting is very exciting as a possibility for some action in 2021. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add just one small point too. I think that people do often forget that, immigration reform for so long was a Republican-led issue because it has huge benefits for our economy. And, in addition to now being a major humanitarian imperative, it's also an economic imperative.
Right.
The last three government shutdowns were over, stalemates over immigration, costing taxpayers billions of dollars. We're leaving dollars on the table by failing to pass this, as well as spending unnecessarily. So.
Great. Thank you very, very much.
Absolutely.
Kate, many DA members live in countries which provide universal health care. I live in London. We've got the National Health Service, who are wonderful. We continue to be horrified by the high cost and limited access Americans have to healthcare in the United States. As a healthcare expert and cancer survivor, how would you propose that Congress legislate in 2021 to see all Americans have equal access to affordable healthcare? And given your position in public health, what strategy do you feel could be advocated at the federal level, which is completely absent right now, to get the COVID pandemic under control? Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And yes, I think we have to start with the fundamental premise that access to healthcare is a human right. right? That everyone deserves access to this. And that's not the case in the United States right now.
Right.
So, I mean, that to me is we have to move towards universal coverage. We have to get to universal coverage. And we were making progress when the Affordable Care Act was passed. And for several years, the number of uninsured went down. Now, since 2016 and all the measures that have gone in to take the mandate away, to take the funding for the navigators who help people get enrolled in marketing, we've seen the number of uninsured tick up. And so I think one of the immediate things you have to do is shore up where we are, get that mandate in place, increase the subsidies so that out-of-pocket costs aren't too high. And obviously funding for navigators and marketing and things like that. And I do believe we have to move towards universal coverage. I'm open to anything that moves us on access, affordability, and quality. Those are the three metrics. This is the number one issue in my district. It was the number one issue even before the pandemic. And I do support a public option, reducing the age of Medicare, making sure that anybody who goes on the exchange can opt into a public option, or any employer can offer it. Because I think that's a way, talk about bipartisan, how do we get people on the same page? You can see that when a public and private compete, that the people like the public. And I think there is a lot of fear out there that that's not a good option with some. And so I think that is a way for there to be openness and transparency around that. I also think we need to negotiate on prescription drugs. It is bananas to me that we're the only country I'm aware of in the world that doesn't negotiate on prescription drugs.
We know that.
Right. It's the only, it's a common business best practice. We did this all the time in my work overseas, right? You need to change the dynamics of these drug markets from high margin, low volume to high volume, low margin. There are ways to sit at the table and negotiate this. So we absolutely should be able to do that. And I also think the pandemic has laid bare a lot of these issues. It's laid bare the issues we have with disparities in our healthcare system. I live in a district where, depending on what zip code you're born in, there is up to 25-year difference in lifespan within this one district. That's unconscionable. It is not okay. And if you look at how our response is as a country, we are less than 5% of the world's population. We've got a quarter of the world's deaths in this pandemic.
Yeah.
Clearly, we are not doing well. We need to dramatically increase the testing to be able, there have been commitments to do this. We're still not where we need to be able to be. So I very much support the increase in testing. We have to speak with a unified voice, empowering our public health experts. Every state on its own. No, it doesn't work that way. You have public health leaders know what the right guidance is and need to be giving clear communication out to everyone about the impact of some of the social distancing, like the wearing the masks and other measures. We need to fund our institutions. We need to fund state and local governments. We need to fund the USPS. We need to fund education, and make sure that all of our frontline essential workers have the protective equipment that they need in this. And we have to extend unemployment insurance. We've got to get our community through this period and also really invest in a way that we can rebuild our economy. And I think there's opportunities there, similar to what Elissa was saying, around, green technology, infrastructure, doing broad investments that create jobs and build us back better and stronger.
That's fantastic. And I can tell you Democrats abroad around the world are supporting candidates like you, because we know this has to be done for America to end this epidemic, as well as giving all our people equal opportunity in healthcare. Thank you. Anne, I turn it back to you.
Yes, well, we've covered a lot of ground already, but because of time limits on everybody, we just have time for maybe one more really great question from the chat that maybe we'll address to all of you. Angela, what do you have?
We have a question about the Green New Deal. If each of the candidates could just briefly say, do they support the Green New Deal? And if so, why? We'll start with Hillary. You look like you want to say something. You're on mute.
You all need those t-shirts that say you're on mute. Environmental issues and combating climate change is a top priority for this campaign. I mentioned all of the ways in which West Michigan in particular is experiencing the devastating impacts of climate change, and I support comprehensive solutions to combating climate change. I think that I don't wholesale support the Green New Deal. I think that primarily the timetables are targeted in a way to be unrealistic, and I think cause people to throw their hands up and walk away. We need aggressive timetables, but setting timetables in a way that are more aggressive than even the state of California had planned to attain, I think sets us up for failure. We need to strive to get to a carbon neutral place within a realistic and aggressive place, focusing on, I believe, all of the above alternatives to reaching that place. I think I agree with President or Vice President Biden and in their platform in trying to attain that by 2050. I think that is an aggressive and reasonable goal, and that's what I'll support when I'm in Congress.
Okay, thank you. Elissa, do you support the Green New Deal?
So I think a lot of the ideas about, being big and being bold on the environment are great. I'm a pragmatist, and I'm about actually seeing change happen. And what happens when you combine all of these interesting environmental policies with the sort of social side, that everyone has a guaranteed job, and we wrap in healthcare, and we make it so big that it hasn't even gone to committee to be marked up. It has no plan to be brought to the committee and onto the floor of the House. So it's too much. And I think that I'm about actually making change in people's lives in the here and now, and that we have much to do on the environment. I just don't think the Green New Deal is a pragmatic way to get things done.
Okay, thank you. Kate?
Thank you. Yeah, the environment is a huge issue in Cincinnati and this district as well. So a lot of people don't think of that. We are on a river here, and we're a very hilly city. And we have had 200-year floods in the last couple of years. And the city is spending tens of millions repairing our hillsides, repairing roads and infrastructure. So it is a very big deal here. And I absolutely support measures that are bold and that move towards net zero emissions by 2050 and set targets towards that. And I'm pretty open to anything that is put forth on that. I do think that Biden's plan that he's put forth is the right plan for the right moment in terms of really investing in green technology and infrastructure, and also tailored to where we are in our economy with this pandemic now too.
Okay, great. As a Cincinnatian, I 100% endorse Kate Schroder. She's awesome. Everybody in Ohio, in Cincinnati, the greater Cincinnati area, please vote for her, because we have to make change. When I was a little girl, Ohio was blue. So it can be blue again.
Okay. So we've come almost to the top of the hour again. So Elissa, Hillary, and Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate so much your taking the time to talk to us and dig into some of these important issues. And we have enough time here for a 1-minute little sentence from each of you, if you'd like to say one more word. Elissa, you want to start?
Sure. I will just say very quickly, inside the Midwest, and Angela knows this is if she's from Cincinnati, inside the Midwest, Ohio and Michigan are the most intense rivalry in the region. But when we're like all together and talking to folks who are not Midwesterners, we are all sisters, we are all brothers. It's us against the world. So it's great to be with my Midwestern brethren here. And, I think I have spoken in front of lots of different groups, but I think the idea of Democrats abroad organizing and making their voices heard is really, really important. In this environment, it's kind of squeaky wheel gets the grease. And with the issues that we talked about, absentee voting, this election, it's so immigration, it is where you all live, right? It's these issues that dominate for Americans living abroad. So I'm thrilled to be here with two fantastic candidates. I urge you all to support them. I know what it's like to be in an uphill battle, to be in a tough race in a Republican district where, half the people meet are like, you seem like a nice girl, but, I'm not sure that you can win that district. I've heard that so many times. I know what it's like, and then we did it. And so please support these candidates. They're fantastic. And Unfortunately, it takes resources because the super PACs and all of the sort of like big dark money have already come in, I think, into all of our races. They're already present. They're already doing attack ads. They're already putting out all kinds of junk. So appreciate your support and for spreading the word about these great candidates.
Okay, thank you, Elissa. Hillary, you have one last minute?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. We are so excited about the work that we are doing here. This seat is not only so important for expanding and deepening our majority in the House. We know that Republicans are coming back for us after we win big in 2020. They're coming back for the House in 2022. The bigger majority we have, the broader line of defense we have against them. But it's also important because the work that we are doing here in Michigan's 3rd to move the electorate Democratic helps reelect our Democratic Senator, Gary Peters, and most importantly, helps make sure that Michigan does not go for Trump again in 2020. For those of you that watched the DNC and you heard Michelle Obama speak about that crucial swing state that went for Trump by less than 2 votes for precinct, she was talking about Michigan. I know so many of my fellow Michiganders feel a keen sense of responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen again. That's why I'm out here fighting to give a voice to my district and make sure Michigan stays blue up and down the ballot in 2020. We'd love your help. I think my staff is going to put in the chat ways that you can get involved, make a contribution if you're eligible, and also get involved and volunteer. I know we have one of our great volunteers on this call who does call time, calls voters for us, and helps get our message out. So we'd love your help there as well. And we'll put that in the chat for ways you can get involved. Thank you so much. We see you, Dems Abroad, and we're fighting for you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, Kate, you get the last word.
Great, thank you. Just to echo what everyone said, thank you for being part of this morning, for all you're doing. It means the world, and there's so much at stake. I don't have to tell you how much is at stake in this election, but we can do this. In this district, you know, I am up against someone who's been in 24 years, who votes 95% of the time with Trump, and we are going to beat him. We've also never elected a woman in this district, so that is especially motivating to me. And the 100-year anniversary of many women getting the right to vote, but not all women. And I do want to echo what the others have said, that support matters. And especially during a pandemic, you can volunteer remotely. We had a summer intern program with 40 interns across 4 countries and 25 schools. So if anybody wants to help on the ground here remotely, that is tremendously helpful. And we will share those links as well. So just thanks again to everyone. And we are fired up to do this. It means a lot, and we can do this together.
Thanks so much. And to our attendees, I hope you've enjoyed our Women to Win Candidates Forum as much as I did. And as a reminder to everybody on this call, please make sure you've registered and requested your ballot. And if you haven't yet, you can go to votefromabroad.org and get started. And because these great women we've just heard from can't help us out in Washington and will wait until we help them get there, we would like to encourage you all to join in on our Voting Champions call right now, where you can learn about some easy, important ways that you can help get out the vote. Thanks again to our guests and all the very, very best with your campaigns. Thanks to Angela, Carol, and her team, and to everyone who took the time to join in this discussion. Now we'll be saying goodbye to our guests and move to some information about our Voting Champions meeting, which we'll hear from Angela. So thank you very much and goodbye. But members, you stay on and hear about the Voting Champions call from Angela. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Angela?
September is the month for overseas voters to vote. Join us and the Voting Champions from all over the world to make sure you have all that you need to help anyone you know get their ballots back this month. You can find out how about plans for Ballot Day, which is September 19th, and Send Your Ballot Back Day, which is September 21st. That's Saturday on the 19th and Monday on the 21st. We can send your ballots back. Get all these details on the voter drop-in sessions, help sessions that we publicize and join the Voting Champions Forum, where we have answers to common questions about voting beyond the frequently asked questions and ideas for actions. This month is critical. It's all hands on deck now. Let's do this. Just join right now, and so that you know what to do. And I'm going to drop the Voting Champions link into the Zoom chat. So please come on over to the next event and become a voting champion. It's very important that we get as many people as possible to vote in this election. It's your children, your adult children. It's your American friend that you don't talk to very often, or your acquaintance at work or wherever. But we have to get as many people to vote as possible. So come to the Voting Champions Forum, and yeah, because we've got to win. And we've got to win Ohio. Wow, I really would be happy to get rid of that Republican in that seat. When I was
important states.
It is.
And in Ohio, one of our members wants to remind all Ohio voters to vote down ballot. There's an important race for the Ohio Supreme Court. It can go Democratic. So make sure you vote for Judge Jennifer Brenner.
Yeah.
Brummer and others to take that Supreme Court back into appropriate judicial philosophy. Thank you.
Okay, so I have 3 last words for all of us: vote, volunteer, and donate. And with that, we're going to end this call and move over to our Voting Champions meeting. It's fun and it's important and it's easy. So we'll thank you very, very much, and we'll see you there. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.